Thanks for joining me. At this dinner party. I know you guys are busy with other people, but I thought maybe we could chat a little bit more about Agile and talked a little bit about architecture, a little bit about testing. But I really want to talk to you guys about how Agile scales, because this customer I'm working with, they were acquired recently by a conglomerate, and they're concerned to see if Agile will work on a large scale in their organization. Is this a valid concern?
Oh yes, it's definitely a valid concern to be worrying about the scalability of Agile. But the good news is that Agile definitely scales very well. So, for example, within IBM, we've delivered software in the marketplace with Agile teams of over 200 people, and we currently have Agile programs around the 500 or 600 person size. So, from a scaling point of view, at least from a size point of view, Agile definitely scales. But one of the things that we've also noticed is that you need to worry about more than just sizing when you're talking about scaling. So, for example, team distribution is a scaling factor as far as I'm concerned, regulatory compliance, governance, good things like that. So I think there's a lot to be considered when we talk about scaling.
Great. So now it works for larger organizations, but what if the company I'm looking at the company I'm talking to is located globally? They're distributed across the world. So I've heard that Agile teams work best if they're co-located, in small teams and located in the same room. Is that true? Is that a misconception? Also,
it's definitely true. I think software teams in general work better in co-located situations, but the reality is that you're not always co-located. So, for example, if you've got people in different cubes, you're distributed now. You're no longer co-located. Let alone if you're on different floors or in different buildings, or if you've got people working from home, or worst case if they're working across the world. So there's very good reasons to distribute your team. You want to leverage expertise wherever you possibly can, but we also need to recognize that we're taking on a lot of risks. So when we do so to mitigate that risk, well, first of all, I always advise people. Don't take the risk on if you can avoid it. Why put your project at risk if you don't have to? But if you do decide to take on that risk, then there's two basic strategies that you want to employ. First, you want to adopt better processes. So one of the things I always advise distributed teams is to organize themselves around the architecture of the system. That your team structure and your architecture should reflect each other, so that way, if I have teams in 3 different locations, perhaps I've got teams in Toronto, Bangalore, and London, then the Toronto team should be working on one or more subsystems, the London team should be working on one or more subsystems, and the Bangalore team should be working on one or more subsystems. A common mistake is to actually to organize the team around job functions. So, for example, to have the business analysts in Toronto, the developers in Bangalore, and the testers in London. And the problem with that approach is that when you step back and observe the collaboration patterns that occur on software development teams, the most collaboration occurs between the people who are developing a subsystem. So by organizing your team around those subsystems, by having the people in the same geographic area, you're actually minimizing the amount of collaboration that needs to occur between sites, and that actually reduces your risk. That's a very good thing. So I think that's an absolutely critical observation to make. The second thing is to improve your tooling. So having integrated tool sets. One of a newer product from Rational is called Rational Team Concert, and I like to say that it's a distributed Agile development environment that's built by a distributed Agile team. And so as a result, the features and the functionality that we see in RTC, Rational Team Concert, actually reflects the realities that distributed Agile teams face. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're seeing so many Agile teams move to RTC now, is because the tooling actually reflects what they're trying to achieve.
I'd observed too that what the concerns of a team individual development team are different than the concerns of the enterprise, because in the one case, you're dealing with the development of an application at the enterprise level. To jump to the other extreme, you're dealing with the creation of systems, and therein the concerns are very, very different. As Scott pointed out, architecture is a key way of governing things across the life cycle, and the practices one has for doing Agile approaches for individual people can also be moved up to the individual teams as well. There's a delightful book, Organizational Patterns for Agile Development, in which Cope and his co-author have taken a look at what hyperproductive teams have done for large systems. And there's a lot of wisdom in there that I'd urge your customer to take a look at. My observation, too, is you start moving at the level of scale of the enterprise, then you've got to worry about true architectural issues. That means you need some other structures in place. You probably need an architecture board. You need some chief architects. You've got to apply those notions at the enterprise level, not just the team level.
Right. Makes sense. So, one thing that I've heard about too is this concept that Agile teams use note cards to document their requirements and their user stories, I guess they call them. So how does something like that scale, in an Agile world, on an enterprise notion?
You get bigger cards, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Whiteboards.
It's pretty hard to scale cards. So I think the index cards definitely work well for co-located teams, but once you get out of that space, then suddenly you need some sort of electronic format and some sort of electronic way to capture the information that you're trying to share between the teams. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why I want to start looking at some of the Jazz platform, because it really is geared to support Agile development in a distributed manner like that.
In effect, Jazz makes the web as the virtual meeting place for these teams that are both temporally as well as geographically distributed. And notice my intentional use of those phrases there. We've been talking about geographically dispersed teams, but one also has to deal with temporal distribution in the sense that, especially at the enterprise level, you find that groups build something and they go off and do something else, and that previous legacy is something that then gets integrated. And preserving the knowledge, the tribal memory of that is something that the web provides a great virtual meeting place to preserve those things. The code's the truth, but the code's not the whole truth.
Exactly.
Right, you want some kind of living documentation, right?
Yes,
Yep.
Living, just the minimal necessary, because there's a lot you can gain from the code itself, but there's also things you cannot determine, you can't grok just by looking at the code.
Right. You have something you wanted to add, Scott?
No, I think that's well said. I think the minimal documentation is absolutely critical, and just observing the fact that temporal distribution is absolutely critical. Systems are long living. I think I've lost track of the number of systems I've been involved with where we honestly intended that they would only last for 6 months, and then 10 or 15 years later you're getting phone calls about them, and people asking questions about how it was built and what you were thinking. So keeping the temporal issue in mind is absolutely critical.
Every code you write today becomes tomorrow's legacy that your children's children end up debugging.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, guys, you guys are looking awful dapper. I think we should get back to the party and maybe get together again and talk some more about maybe some of the issues around working with Agile and legacy systems, and maybe talk about some other things to wrap up our conversations. What do you say?
Gladly. There's a great jazz club that I can take you guys to when we're done here.
All right, let's get out of here.
Okay.
To find out about upcoming UK events on some of the topics discussed, visit ibm.com/IT solutions/UK/agile-events.